What is going on, everybody? I'm Dr. Luigi, and today I'm going to be giving you the final episode of bringing your Toolbox file into MTS. This is probably the most complicated part, but it's also the most robust, and that is creating your vehicle JSON. It is probably the most feared portion of all of this. Making a model is easy. Converting it into Blender is just a matter of typing, but JSON is a little more complicated. However, I do have a few tips and tricks, as well as a special tool that I made that will make all this a lot easier. As well as the fact that you'll be using UNU parts rather than having to make your own engines and wheels and stuff, which just adds some more complexity. So having a standardized UNU parts system is very beneficial for everyone who uses it. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into what you are going to need before you get started. Now, of course, previously you just needed Toolbox and Blender. However, there are a couple of things that will make your life a lot easier if you use those. And the first one is this. This is the UNU Modelling Helper. It's a Excel file that I created that makes making JSONs far easier. This automatically converts MTS. So right here, this converts Toolbox coordinates to MTS coordinates. This converts Toolbox rotations to MTX rotations, which is very helpful, especially if you're not that great with trigonometry. This converts Flansmod seats to MTS seats. This is one that I am very glad I made because this is a pain in the butt every single time. This section right here helps you with HUD textures, which is also kind of a pain in the neck. And then this is one that I created for PhysFend for calculating shape box angles, and this box is not used yet. And you could download this in the same place that you could download UNU parts. So you will also need a bunch of UNU parts, and so some of these are not going to be available because they're super specific. I don't think you're going to need the mule beds, but these that will apply to most people are available in the modeling archives. So this is a special server set up by the Cactus for MTS models. And so if you scroll down here to Dr. Luigi's models, you can see the UNU Modeling Helper. This is where you can download this Excel file that's very useful, as well as all the UNU engines, all the UNU wheels, the UNU seats, and the miscellaneous UNU parts such as bumper stickers, advertisements, sirens, etc. And so this is where you can get all the UNU parts that you'll be using with your model and the modeling helper. I do hope to one day create something that will automatically make a JSON, but for now I don't have the software, so we're just going to be stuck with making our own using this modeling helper. This is very helpful, and this is really going to make your life easier. So, there's a common saying in MTS: every airplane starts as an MC-172, and every vehicle starts as a Scout. And that is because that is where we are going to be starting. Now, normally I will start in a vehicle that I've already made because I have some of my own little standards, but for the sake of this video, I am going to start from the bottom. As you can see, I've already made a JSON file, so I don't have to worry about the troubleshooting with things for this specific model. That will allow us to just jump right in. So go ahead and download the MTS official pack, and that is going to be right here. Come into the assets folder, MTS official pack, JSON defs, not JDefs, and then vehicles and the Scout. So this is where you'll start if you have an airplane, but we're covering vehicles, and so you're going to start with the Scout. So go ahead and name it whatever you decided to name your vehicle. So I'm going to go ahead and go with my very concise name. Oops. Make sure to name it before you open it. Alright, and we can jump right into it. So the first portion that you see is the definitions. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up my other one because this has some recipe stuff that's already easier. So this is where you can set up other skins. So for example, this Jeep has 4 total skins. There's the Blackthorn Blue, and then there's Winter Camo, Desert Camo, and Forest Camo. So because of that, I have 4 separate skins. And so the first one is just the default one, the Blackthorn blue, and so I'm going to set that to have nothing here, and that will make it so that it automatically chooses the skin texture file that matches this name. And so this is all just for different skins of the vehicles, that way you don't have to do a different JSON every time. And then right here you can set up the recipe that's required, and so if we come over here we can see that I did a little cheat sheet and did the die codes up here. And so you can see the subname 0, and I have it require one black die, or sorry, one red die. No, sorry, one black die. So it goes the mod, which is Minecraft, die, metadata, which for dies is up here. I typed that in. You could look that up on the wiki. And then how many of that material, and then this is 3 of the blue dies. And so then another texture is desert. So this would be underscore desert, and then of course you could set what materials are used there, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead, because this part is not very important, I'm going to go ahead and copy that. So again, we have the default skin, then the desert skin, which requires 1 black and 3 yellow, and then a forest skin with 1 black and 2 green, or 3 green, and then winter skin, which is 1 light gray and 3 white. And so you can see how this plays out by coming into our textures folder here. And I'm not going to go into complete file structure for that, just sort of look at the original MTS, and I might make a separate tutorial for that. This is just focused on getting the model in. And so you can see down here, there's our, I'm going to go ahead and put this into detail mode. So you can see down here, here's our vehicle name, and this is the original one. So this is the blue texture. You can see that's just nice and pretty blue. And then this is the desert and forest and winter texture, and these are of course the corresponding camouflages. And so that is what the subtypes do. And we can set the additional crafting requirements up here. Then we come down to the general section, and this applies to every model. And so the type, if you're doing a vehicle, is either car or plane. Of course, this is a car. Open top is either going to be true or false, and this determines whether or not engine sounds are muffled. Now, of course, this Jeep is an open top, so I'm going to go ahead and set that to true. And this will not muffle engine sounds and make it so that the sounds when you're inside the car are just as loud as when you're outside the car. Empty mass, this is the mass in kilograms, so the vehicle is empty, so for this one it is 1200, right? Yep. And then the materials required to craft it, and I believe I decided to make that 30 iron ingots. You can get as creative as you want with these recipes. You can even require items from other mods. However, if you do that, make sure to list that mod as a requirement in your pack loader, which again I may or may not cover in a later tutorial. That's all in the handbook, and that's sort of the making the mod part. So the next we have the fuel capacity. So this is motorized. This is for all motorized vehicles. And the fuel capacity is in millibuckets. So this is 15 buckets. And I tend to just leave it like that. That seems to work fine. The horn sound, you can make your own horn sound, but it's difficult to make it loop properly and everything. So if you download the UNU pack, you can use the official UNU horns, because this can use sounds from other packs. So I highly recommend you download the UNU pack. I'm going to be doing this tutorial assuming you are going to use the UNU pack. And so you can either do UNU parts horn car 1 or truck 1. Those are the 2 horns that currently exist. I like the car, or something like the Jeep. So next we come to instruments. Now instruments is where it starts getting a little fancy. So first you have to decide how many instruments you want, and these are of course things like speedometers, fuel gauges, tachometers, that sort of thing. So for this Jeep I decided I'm going to give it 2 gauges, so we're going to go ahead and chop it down to 2. Alright, so then we can come into here, and I decided to put the gauges right here. And so this is just a 0 by 2 by 2 part that is swooshed right on in there, and that's going to represent where the gauges go. And as you can see, the location is centered on this part, and it's very important to do because that's how they are. And you can see that it is 2 by 2. And that's all very important stuff. So the first thing you need to do is figure out the position. And so this is where the little UNU Excel file comes in really handy. Go ahead and bring this up. Okay, and so you see the toolbox coordinates are 27.99, -14, 9.5, and just like that, automatically we get the MTS location. That's all there is to it. And so then we just paste that bad boy right there, and for some reason it adds an enter there, and there you go. There's your position. Alright, so I'm going to go and move this over here. And so this looks like it is the left gauge. So I like to keep track of which gauges are used, just because that makes things easier. So then, of course, you'd set the rotation. Now, this is obviously not rotated, so I don't have to put any rotations there. But let's say you wanted to tilt it forward like this, so you had tilted back. Then you would just copy like -6 degrees, and you would put that right here. And actually, let's say you wanted to rotate it -6 degrees, you can get the rotation thing right here. And this is the Z rotation is -6, so you -6. Oh wait, never mind. Sorry, please ignore this. This is for something different. You would just put the -6, so you have to swap the X and Y, the X and Z. So yeah, this -6 would become -6 right here, but I am not rotating it, so that doesn't really matter. Alright, so then we get onto the HUD position. Now the HUD position is a lot of fun. I usually tend to try not to mess with it too much. I've set up my own little standard for HUD positions, so I tend to keep the Y, which is the up and down, centered. And so what the HUD position is this is the position on the heads-up display that pops up. So that's the one that looks like a little dashboard that sticks up. I think I can actually show you. So that is what this is. So this is the HUD, and sometimes there's a texture that pops up if you are in certain views, and so this determines the positioning of the gauges. And so if you want the gauges to sit flat like this, then the Y value that you're going to need is 60 to 63 to 65, somewhere around there. So I'm going to leave this one at 63, and then you have this X value, and this is how far back and forth the HUD is. And so you really set this up to how much you want the parts, the HUD devices, the instruments separated, and how many of them you want. And so over here, so let me just bust out a little calculator. And so if we go over here, you can see that I have the HUDs separated right here. So if I type in 60.42635 minus 39.57365, they're about 20% spaced, and this is the HUD scale of 0.85, and so you see over here the HUD scale is 9. So honestly, having it spaced 20 between each gauge is perfectly fine. So that's what I'm going to do for this. And we're going to have two gauges, so we want them evenly spaced out and centered. So that means that there's 20 spaces in between, and that's going to center around 50%. And so that's going to be 40 and 60. And that's just my personal preference of what I like to do. I like to use nice big whole numbers. I don't know why I've been using super decimals. This is more than fine for HUD position because it's kind of about anyway. So as you see, 40 and 60 are 20 apart, and they are centered around 50. And so of course the X position starts from the left hand side and works its way over. So 40% is going to be right about here, and then 60% is going to be right about here. And then the HUD scale is going to be about 9. And this determines how big the gauge is on the HUD. Alright, so then we get the regular scale. So I mentioned everything else except for the regular scale. And so the regular scale is pretty easy to figure out. The instruments start out, so I'm going to call this right. So the instruments start out at 128 pixels. Now this is 2 pixels. So let me get the calculator again, because for some reason I X'd out. And so to figure out the scale, because I want my gauges to be 2 pixels wide on the model, I have to take 2 divided by 128, and that gives you the scale. So then you just copy this and you paste it right there. As you can see, this is much smaller than it was by default, but I like it, and so that's what I'm going to do. And so it's really helpful if you just sort of put this in the model, then you can divide. The HUD stuff is a little less precise. It can be more about, whereas on the model you really want to keep it precise so it shows up in the right spot on the model. And then of course this other HUD, let me go ahead and type in the other toolbox locations. So this is going to be the same, and this is 6.5. So I can come down here, copy this, and paste it right there. Perfect. So now we have our instrument panel done. So that's really helpful. The controls, you can just keep blank. That's mostly for airplanes. And then next we get to the car section. So is it a big truck? No. Big trucks will have, I believe, air brake noise, like a psst whenever it stops, as well as a backup horn, like a beep, beep, whenever you back the truck up. So this Jeep obviously doesn't have that, so it's not a big truck. Is it front wheel drive? Yes. Is it rear wheel drive? Yes. So this determines whether your car is front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, or four wheel drive. And this is determined based on the wheel location. So if the wheel is located at 0 or behind 0, so here, as you can see, we have the wheel set at 0. If it is at 0 or it's behind 0, then those are considered rear wheels, and if it's in front of 0, then it's considered front wheels. And that doesn't really matter to us. We're doing all-wheel drive, so every single wheel is going to be driven. But if you do rear-wheel drive, then these wheels are going to be driven, and any wheels behind this blue line. And if you do front-wheel drive, any wheels in front of those are going to be driven. So that's how MTS determines front versus rear. And then drag coefficient. This is how aerodynamic your vehicle is. You can either look it up if you want to be super realistic. I tend to just sort of guesstimate it. So I guesstimated this at 0.45. I didn't really modify it. So I think I'm actually just going to put this at 0.5 now that I reconsider it. And that determines, how the top speed of your vehicle based on how aerodynamic it is. With 1 being it's not aerodynamic at all, like 0 aerodynamicness, and 0 being perfectly aerodynamic. Alright, so then we get to parts. Parts are a lot of fun, and as you can see, there aren't very many parts on the Scout, and so this is a good place to start. And this is where you have to start working with the UNU parts. So the UNU parts are kind of interesting to work with. They are very well made. I mean, I made the parts, so I might be a little biased, but they're pretty good parts. So you have a pretty good wide range of parts to choose from. So you can see there are currently 7 different types of wheels. There are 3 types of seats. I didn't upload one of them for some reason. And then there are a bunch of engines to choose from. And these are going to be the main parts that make up your vehicle. You could use MTS parts if you would like. The process for that's a little harder with Toolbox because the Toolbox files don't exist for MTS parts, so that makes it really hard to do the positions to get them just right because you can't actually see where they are on your model. So I would recommend using UNU parts just because these are all in Toolbox files and will make it very easy to locate just right on your model. Plus they're higher quality. So if that's something that you care about and you don't care about it being not pixely or whatever. So let's go ahead and do the wheels first. So these are called ground devices, and doing the wheels is actually very easy. Most cars are going to have 4 wheels, and you should always center your rear axle on 0, so you really only need to take the position of this front driver's side wheel, and then you know the position of all the wheels, and I'll show you why in a minute. So let's go ahead and open up the UNU parts, and the wheel I chose to use for this is a 3D14. And so the way the UNU wheel names work is you have the width of the wheel, so this would be 3 pixels, and then the diameter of the wheel is 14 pixels for the 3D14. They can see 3 wide, 14 across, and this is the wheel. Now this wheel includes this little section right here, which we're not going to need because this section is meant for you to put the wheel on your model. So as you can see, I have these little sections on here, and so this is meant for you to put this on your model. So we're going to go ahead and hold Alt and press V. That's to make those disappear, because those are meant to help you put the wheel on your model so that it looks nice and fancy like this. So then we're going to go over to Edit, select all visible parts, now that those parts that we do not want are invisible. Then you're going to want to go up here and make sure to set it to drill head. This will be very helpful in just a moment when you want to delete this, because it makes deleting this a lot easier. So then you got to hold Control, Alt, and then press C to copy the parts. And then you come into your model and hold Control, Alt, and V. And that will paste this wheel right in here. Now you'll notice that this texture is super ugly because the wheel texture is not defined by your model. It's defined by its own texture. So don't worry about that. That's going to be normal. So you don't have to worry about texturing this because this isn't part of your model. So then with your UNU wheel, you have to decide where you want it to be. Now you do have to make sure that it is on the driver's side, and if you want to put any wheels on the passenger side, you have to rotate it by 180 degrees because it's mirrored. So let's go ahead and get this wheel into position. And now that is where I want the wheel for the back. And so then I'm just going to move it forward. And this, this is the first wheel, this back wheel right here. Let's go ahead and figure out where it is. So again, you type in the toolbox coordinates, which is 0, 0, 15, and this gives you your MTS coordinates. And so this is going to be our first wheel. Perfect. And then you can set a maximum and minimum value. This determines the maximum and minimum size wheel you could fit in here. Now I'm kind of picky, and so for this I'm going to make it a little easy and say that I only want the exact wheel size, which is 14 pixels. So I have to take the calculator, which I keep closing, and I type in 14 divided by 16 because there's 16 pixels in one block, and that's 0.875. So that's going to be the maximum and minimum size. And this will only allow wheels of this exact size to go on the vehicle. Now if you want to do a little bit of wiggle room, then you can sort of round it, so you can make the minimum size 8 and the maximum size 0.9. That will still allow this wheel to connect, but will allow some wiggle room so for other wheels to connect. And so I'm going to do that. You can also get a little more precise by seeing, by putting different UNU wheels on there and seeing the smallest one before things start scraping and the biggest ones before they start scraping and all that. But I'm going to cut a little corner here and just do that. Alright, and that's it. So you can notice down here it says turns with steer. This is another thing you can add, and these are for the front wheels that turn when you steer. But this is a back wheel, and so it doesn't have that. Alright, so now we're going to do the wheel on the other side, because you can see this next one does not turn with steer, and so we're just going to kind of go along down the list and follow it. Now there are two ways you can do this. The one way is to rotate it 180 degrees, and then bring it onto the other side, and do the whole typing thing. But you may notice this is -15 and the other one was +15. So to take a little shortcut, we can just copy this wheel all the way over and then just make this negative. And that makes life a little easier. And now of course we can move this forward. And a quick way to check if your wheel is done properly is if you sort of select your wheel, your center should be on the inside. So this is the inside of the wheel, and that's another way you can check. But as long as you remember to rotate it 180 degrees when you're doing it on the passenger side, you'll be good to go. Okay, and now this looks like where we're going to want the wheel for the front, so we can enter this into the toolbox thing. And so it's going to be 40, 0, -15. And this is the front wheel. And again, just like the last one, we could easily copy this. And here, we're going to want to copy the minimum and maximum values too. And just like the previous wheel, we can actually copy this over and then just remove this negative because it's on the other side. And of course, you can do the same thing over here. Whoops. You can do the same thing right here, and if you type in 50, the negative goes away. And so if you're not sure, if you're not confident in doing the swapping the negatives and stuff, you can just go ahead and do it all in this Excel file. And then another quick way to do it is just to do one of the front wheels if you have 4 wheels and it's centered on the back, and then you could just copy this, and you can see that this 0.38 is the same, and then this 2.5 is the same here. But then over here, this 2.5 turns into a 0, and then these numbers are the same because you're just moving it back to the 0 position. But that's no matter. You could, of course, type it all manually, and that's a good way to prevent accidents. Alright, so now we are done with our wheels. And so, remember how we set all of our wheel parts to drill head? Well, we didn't use drill head when we made any of these parts, and that is because with the wheels set to drill head, we can right click it, select all drill head parts, and then delete them because we don't need them anymore, and we don't want them cluttering up our model. So next, to determine the seat, you must position the seat in Flange Mod. So this is the Flange Mod seat tool. Go ahead and click show seats, and all you do is you add a seat and then you sort of move it into how you want it. So let's just go ahead and we'll move this one to match the other one I made. So we'll just sort of get him right in there, and then right over like so. Alright, they're two good old buddies. So now we've got the 2 seats. Now, Flange Mod seats, if you just want to, let's say you know how to translate Toolbox coordinates into MTS, you think you figured it out, Flange Mod seats are going to prove you wrong because they're very different from just how the Toolbox stuff is, and not to mention that they're positioned slightly different than MTS seats. Some of the signs are switched from Toolbox itself, which means converting over to here is a mess, and then there's 3 pixel up and down difference. Don't worry about that. You've got the UNU MTS Modelling Helper. So all you do is you type in the X, Y, and Z here, and it'll spit out the MTS coordinates just like before. Just make sure that you're in the Flange Mod seat section. So we're going to go ahead and do the driver seat first. As you can see, it's highlighted in red, and its position is 12, 6, -8. We're going to copy this, and you'll notice there are 2 seats here. One of them is controller true. This means that this seat is going to control the vehicle. So we want this to be the driver's seat. And then we're going to go ahead and type in the other seat. And as you can see, it just changes the 8 into a -8. And so we can copy this. Now, there are a lot of different seats in MTS. And you'll notice that there are also UNU seats. If you're using the UNU pack, you could, of course, just leave this seat thing empty. But I prefer to specify which seat can be put in. And that is because UNU offers 3 different types of seats currently. There's a low profile seat, which is helpful for things like the Corvair, where the player's butt will stick out of the car because it's such a low car. The truck seat, which is good for, upright seats, when you're driving a truck, and then regular passenger seats for cars like this. Where it sort of has some room, but they are still kind of low in the vehicle. So I'm going to specify to only use the UNU passenger seat 3, which is the regular passenger seat. And so I can type in custom type. And then, parentheses, UNU P3. Let's see if I got that right. Off the top of my head. Look at that. Custom types, UNU P3. And of course, you're going to want to make sure to copy that comma. And so this prevents other seats from going in there. So say like my low profile seat, which would look really ugly in the Jeep. And so to show you the comparison, I'm going to leave that off of the passenger seat, but then leave that on the driver's seat, just so you can see the difference and why you might want to specify which UNU seat you want to use in the car. So then next we can see there's a crate position. Now this position is very special because it can allow a seat or a crate. And so if you want to allow different types of parts, you can easily just throw a comma right there and continue on like this. Now, I don't plan on using a seat back here, but I'm just going to use a crate. And so to position a crate is kind of special. You have to create a new part. So let's go ahead and get the seats out of there now that we're done with the seats. So if you want to put crates in your vehicle, and someone want to put 2 crates in the back, you want to create a new part and then set the dimensions to 12 by 12 by 12, 12 pixel box, and then set the offsets to -6, -6, -6. This is how all crates in MTS currently work. And then now this box is exactly like a crate, so you can just position this exactly how you want it. And so I want it scooched a little back. Whoops, don't use offsets. And then 6 over, that way I can fit 2 crates. Look at that. 2 crates fit in there perfectly. And again, all you have to do is enter these coordinates into the coordinate system in Toolbox. So -4, -13, -6. And I just want to allow crates, so I'm going to delete the seat section and then paste in the coordinates. And now I'm kind of familiar with Toolbox, so I know that you can just delete that negative and that will put the seat on the other side. And now the last section is the engine, which is engine underscore car for this engine type. There's also engine underscore plane, but we're not an airplane, we're a car. And so again, you'll notice the same familiar position, types, and then min-max value. And this is the fuel usage values. So if you want to make sure, if you want to prevent super weak engines or super strong engines from going to your car, you can go ahead and set these how you want them. And to figure out the fuel usage values, those are shown in game, and I can show you that once we get there. So to set up the engine, let's go ahead and delete these crates. First, you have to figure out which engine you want. And of course, UNU offers a wide variety of engines, and I'm going to go ahead and go with the V8. This is a really nice engine. It's pretty powerful, has quite the kick to it. I need to nerf it a little bit, but it's a fairly nice engine. Now you're going to want to turn on your center crosshairs because some engines, like this one, have parts that are not centered at the center of the engine. This is very important. You want to make sure to know, like this bottom part here, this is centered at 0, 0, 0. This is important for when you want to position the engine. So go ahead and select all the parts, make sure that they're all set to drill head, and then Control-Alt-C to copy them. Then bring them over here, Control-Alt-V, and now again we have our engine. Don't worry about the texture. And then you can just sort of position this where you want it. You can be as precise or as crude as you like. I built this model with this specific engine location in mind, so I'm going to position it properly. There we go. And so that's where I want the engine in this vehicle. So remember, this oil pan was at 0, 0, 0. Well, now it's at a new position, and that position is your engine position. Let's go ahead and bring up the good old Excel file. 36, -3, 0. And that's your engine position. So let's go and put that right here. Alright, and just like before, we can go ahead and delete all the drill head parts, and that deletes your engine. Alright, but now there's one other thing that you're going to want to do with the engine, and that is the custom type, just like before. You want to make sure that no other engines go in your vehicle, because you don't want, say, a GMC diesel engine going in your Jeep, or an AMC 4-cylinder going in your big rig. So you want to make sure to specify what engine can go in your vehicle, especially when you do your vehicles how I do, where the exhaust and everything lines up, and if the right engine is in there, it looks nice, but the wrong engine is in there, it looks really whack. So the UNU engine names are UNU underscore and then the engine code. And so previously it was the seat code, which is P3, and the engine code is this last little part. And so it's V8. And so there's also V8H or H6 or I8H or whatever. So this is V8. And if you need help with engine codes, just let me know. But they're pretty straightforward. And so we're going to go V6 and V8. Those are the two engines that will work in this vehicle. Okay, so those are all the parts, and that's actually pretty coincidental that all of the parts line up from the Scout to this Jeep, although I guess this is really just a glorified Scout. Alright, so we've gotten quite a bit of the JSON done, so let's go ahead and continue on with the collision boxes. Now the collision boxes are alright, they gotta be done. And so this basically determines where the player can interact with your model, how your model interacts with the world. This is basically the actual physical parts. You can get as in detail or as undetailed as you want. I tend to just do hitboxes on flat surfaces like the hood or the roof or the trunk area, you know, places where players could theoretically stand. And so I'm just going to do two hitboxes. Sometimes I'll also do hitboxes on the wheels, but those are problematic, so I'm not going to bother with those on this one. So I'm going to go ahead and make two hitboxes. I'm going to make one hitbox that is for this hood section, then one hitbox that is for this back bed section. So again, you're going to want to create a box. Now I like to make my boxes too thick. That's just kind of a preference. It makes it a little easier to use in Toolbox as well. And again, you want to make sure that your offsets are all centered. So your toolbox must be centered. I mean, your collision box must be centered. So this offset must be half of whatever this dimension is. So let's go ahead and slide this up forward. And I'm going to sort of estimate that it's 20 by 20. I'm not sure how big it's going to be, but 20 by 20 seems like a good guess. Alright, as you can see, I set those to -10, -10. And look at that, 20 by 20 is actually a pretty good guess. So we're going to go ahead and position this right where we want it. And actually 22 by 22 is probably better. So let's go ahead and make this a little bigger. And then of course make sure this is half. Yep, that works a lot better. And so this box is going to be where the player can like stand on here, or if you crash into something, you'll get hit right there. And this is sort of how your vehicle interacts with the world. Of course, you could do this as complicated as you want, so you could make little hitboxes that go all along the sides and stuff, but that's just not what I do. You can see if you press F3B in game, you can see the hitboxes that various vehicles have. There is one caveat to this. The X dimension and the Z dimension must be identical. So you can't have your hitbox be a rectangle. It has to be a square that is a certain thickness. So let's go ahead and figure out the size. And so I don't have a UNU tool for this yet. I probably should. So to figure out the width, that's going to be this 22 divided by 16. You always divide by 16, and that's 1.375, and that's the width. And then the height is 2 divided by 16. In this case, which is 0.125. The position we can figure out with the UNU tool. So that's 41, -13, 0. And that's going to be right there. And the position is going to be right here. Now I'm just going to be doing two collision boxes. Obviously, you can do much more. And I'm going to bring this hitbox. I guess I don't need this or this anymore. So I can go ahead and exit out of the engine and the wheel. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and bring this back and see how I'm going to make this back one. Alright, so as you can see, this back is kind of going to be more of a rectangle. And so there are two ways you can go about this. You can make two hitboxes, so you can go like this, and copy it, and then make this one positive. And these two hitboxes will sort of kind of combine into one. And then of course you could lower this. And so that's a good way to get around the limitation of the square hitboxes, is because you can kind of use two to make a rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And serendipitously, these are actually the same size. I could make it a little smaller, so actually I'm just going to do that just to make a more complete tutorial. I'm going to make it 16 by 16, which is actually very nice because that 16 divided by 16 equals 1. And that is going to be the size of the hitbox. Let's go ahead and get this a little more into position here. Yep, so that's how I'm going to do the hitboxes for this. Oh, it's -8, not -6. position. Alright, so now I have the two hitboxes, and what's nice is the width is just 1, because, 16 by 16 is 1. And then the thickness is the same, it's going to be 0.125, because I didn't change the thickness. And then we have the UNU thing right here, so -3, -8, 8. And I'm going to copy this and then make this negative, because that's how it works when things are opposite of each other. Perfect. So those are all the hitboxes. You could, if you wanted to, make the hitbox tall and skinny. So if we go ahead and do 2 by 2 by 8, so then -1. So this is how you could do the walls. And so as you can see, now we have a tall and skinny collision box, and you can just sort of bring this out to the side and use a bunch of these to make walls. That gets really complicated really fast, because then you have like a whole bunch of them. It's not really that important, and they're going to be modifying the collision box system eventually anyway. So don't put too much stress in hitboxes. As long as you need at least 2 big ones, sort of on the back and on the front or on the roof or something, or like one big one, because they need to be on either side of this axle. Otherwise, your vehicle is going to sink into the ground. So just make sure you have like at least one sort of in the back and one sort of in the front, to prevent the vehicle from falling into the ground. Or like if you have like one big one that's a giant flat plate, that'll work too, as long as some of it's on this other side to prevent it from like tipping and falling into the earth. It's a lot of fun, but it's not too bad. Alright, so next we get into number of windows. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's probably the easiest part of the whole thing. Alright, default display text. That goes into text markings, and so I always do BT-0000 Blackthorn default license plate. And we'll go ahead and cover license plates just in a sec right down here, or anything. So next we get into HUD backplate and molding textures. So for this, you are going to need your texture. So let's go ahead and edit. I use Paint. That's pretty, seems like the easiest way to do it. Alright, so HUD, let's see if I can hopefully find a screenshot of an actual competent HUD. Some of my models are kind of cheap on the HUD, so let's see if I can actually find one. Here we go. So this is what the HUD texture looks like, and as you can see, there's an outer border, which I usually like to match the outside of the car, and then an inner border, which I usually tend to make some sort of gray. And so this HUD is textured in a way that's a lot different if you're familiar with FlansMod. It's determined by percentages. And so you can set up where on the texture it pulls the HUD texture from. So I typically will like to make it super duper zoomed in on like 1 pixel, just because that is a little easier. But you can actually do a range. So like, let's say you wanted this entire rectangle to be your back texture, and it kind of repeats in a tessellated pattern. You could do that. I just like to super zoom on 1 pixel, just because that gives this nice even flat texture. And if you try to texture it with like a pixel range, it gets really weird and stretchy and skinny, and you can see that on some of the official models. So I'm going to show you to do it with my method, but you can really do it however. And so I'm going to take the molding, which is this blue outside part, and that's going to be this dark blue. And so if you use Paint, which is what I use, and it's the easiest for me, you just got to hover your pen over kind of the spot you want. You can see over here in this corner, it'll tell you the texture position. So it's 7338, and then this texture is 256 by 256. So come into Excel and go to the HUD texture and set the texture size to whatever it is. And then there's the minimum and maximum. And so I'll show you how to do it with this range, and then I'll show you how to do it with 1 pixel. So let's go ahead and start over here. The minimum is going to be x is 67 and y is 35. So the minimum is 37. And what was it? I already forgot. 6735. 6735. Then the maximum is going to be on the other side. That's going to be 8240. So 8240. Now, if you see any negatives down here, or where this number is bigger than this number is bigger than this number. If that's not the case, then you're entered wrong. Make sure your max is bigger than your minimum, and that's going to be what you plug in. Now I'm going to do it super zoomed in on 1 pixel, so that's 7337. So 7337, 7337, and then copy this. So either way, then you just copy this and you put it in here. So this is the molding because it's blue, and that's at least what I decided to do. And then if you're doing super zoomed on 1 pixel, just add a 1 to these max values. Alright, and then you can do the same thing for the back plate. I'm going to make it this color right here. So that's 926, 926, 926. Perfect. And again, if you're doing the super pixel like I do, just add a 1 to these. Alright, and so then the default display text max length, this is the maximum amount of characters your text display can have, and that's going to be 7. Now, your text display can be wherever you want, and it can be on the side, it can be like the airplane number, or just a message on a sign. I use it for license plates, that's just a personal preference. And so I'm going to go ahead and copy this, just because it's an easy place to start. Okay. And so if you want to use the same license plate system that I figured out, my license plates are 4 pixels by 7 pixels, and the scale is 0.13. So the scale determines how big the text is. The rotation determines if the text is rotated, which this is 180 degrees for the back license plate. So by default, the text is facing forward. And so if I want to put text on the back, I have to rotate it 180 degrees. And so that's what this is right here. And then of course these are the positions. And so for license plates, you just figure out where you want your text to be, and you type it into the good old converter tool. You do want to add a 0.01, so there's no z fighting. So instead of 54.10, I'm going to do 54.11. Then negative 3.5, and then 10.5. And this is the front one. And then the back. So negative 15.11, negative 3.5, negative 10.5. Copy this and put it right there. Perfect. And then I want the color to be black, and so this is the hexadecimal for whatever color you want. Okay, now we have rotatable objects. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. So if you come over here to the MTS handbook, I should have been referencing this for the light section previously, but I have those pretty much memorized. Those aren't too complicated. But if you go ahead and come all the way down to page 19 of 39, you can see all of the rotation variables, as well as a brief description of what they do. Those rotation variables are what go in rotation variable. So I'm going to go ahead and delete everything but this one. And we're just going to start going one by one. And it is probably good to make a copy. Make sure, don't forget your commas. You need the commas in there, but not on the last one. Okay, so this is where you need your Blender model, because we separated all the rotatable parts. So brake pedal. This is obviously the brake pedal. The name is $brake pedal. So let's go ahead and copy that, and we'll do that first. The part name, $brake pedal. Okay, so now is where we actually start having fun. The rotation axis, you kind of just, for the throttle, just sort of copy what's already here. This is the x-axis, which is left and right on the model, so you do want it to rotate about that axis. And then the rotation point is going to be the same as your part here. So as you can see, I set the point right there. That's where I want the pedal to rotate. So we use a good old texture. This tools 26. This tool is very useful because it saves you from having to divide by 16 all the time. So the brake pedals and have this rotation point. And then over here, we're going to go ahead and give it the brake variable. Perfect. And you can leave this alone. So this is, again, left and right. This is just a straight line. All right, so this gas pedal, we'll just I'm just going to go ahead and leave it. I think I named a gas pedal right here. So we're going to go ahead and name that. The rotation point is going to be right over here. 26, negative 4.5, 2. Perfect. Put that right there. And you can have the same, or if you decide that it's not rotating enough or it's rotating too much, you can multiply or divide every single number by the same amount, and then it'll rotate it in the same direction. So I am going to just make this 1, because that's how I like to do it, and then throttle. And now UNU vehicles use the same part for e-brake as brake. So this brake, when you push it down, it's going to be the brake, and when you pull it back, it's going to be the e-brake. And so that allows me to use the exact same rotation point, then make the rotation axis negative, so that rotates backwards, and then parking brake, which is P_brake, I believe. Let me go ahead and check. Yep. All right. So those are the easy ones. So what else do we have rotating? Well, let's see. We got the drive shaft, which that's a lot of fun because it's at an angle. And then the left bearing and hubs. Oh boy. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to show you how to do all this hubs and stuff because that's not going to apply to most people. I'll show you how to do the back one just because you might want to do that. And then I'll show you how to do the steering wheel because the steering wheel is going to be the most difficult. And I'll show you the gear shift because I posted that right there. But I'm not going to show you all these just because that's kind of beating a dead horse. So we'll do the steering wheel and the gear shift. So let's go ahead and copy those names. So shifter. And steering wheel. And the reason I want to show you these in particular is because you'll notice that they're rotated, and that means they're going to rotate on a rotated axis, which can be a pain because it requires trigonometry, and for me it's always guessing which one goes where because I don't really have this coordinate system down. I pretty much have to guess and check every single time, but not with this Excel thing because I figured it out once. And guessing and checking and switching things around until it finally worked. And so now with this Excel sheet, you don't need to do this. So first, let's go ahead and get the gear shift and steering wheel. So steering wheel and gear shift. Gear shift. All right. Now this is going to be a little interesting. So the shifter, luckily, rotates on the same axis as the steering wheel. So first we're going to have to, I just realized a texture piece is missing. That's interesting. Anyway, so the steering wheel is going to rotate about this point on a specified axis. So, and the gear shift is going to be copied. So let's go ahead and just get the coordinate first. So that's 24, negative 14, 8. And those are going to be the same for the shifter as well as the steering wheel. But we have this rotations tool, and this makes life much easier because you don't have to fiddle around with trigonometry or other stuff. You can just type it in. So you type the rotation X, Y, and Z. Currently, X doesn't really do anything because if you notice, if I rotate X, that just steers in the same direction. So if you change the X, it doesn't do anything. So don't be alarmed if you type this and nothing changes. It literally doesn't do anything. Y, in this case, is 0 and then negative 45. And this gives us our vector. And of course, you can also set the magnitude. And so the magnitude, let's say you want to rotate it less, you type it 0.5 and it divides everything by 0.5. And if you want it just to be default, then you do 1. Or if you want to reverse the rotation, you do negative 1. So we'll do negative 1 for the shifter because I happen to know that the shifter always goes backwards. And then we'll do 1 for the steering wheel. So this is probably the most useful part of the system. And let's say 3 decimal places is not precise enough for you. Well, you can even come over here and change the digits to 5. And now everything will be rounded to 5 decimal places. In theory. It's probably a 0. Next. So yeah, but 3 is good enough for now. However, just for the sake of demonstration, another very powerful thing about this, so well, I should probably just check the Blender thing. Front drive shaft. This was a nightmare. I've already done this, JSON, as I mentioned. This was a nightmare because it's rotated on 2 axes. It's rotated, you know, up and down and left and right. And so getting this to spin properly is a nightmare because it's 3-dimensional trigonometry. It's not fun. It's not fun. Well, now it's easy. You just type in 17 and negative 13 and boom, bam, boom. You get your complicated vector there, and you want to go and multiply it by 2 because it's got a 2-to-1 gear ratio, and you're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this here just to show you that that took me a long time to figure out, and we just did it while I was busy rambling. Alright, so that is going to be our JSON. So let's go ahead and throw it in game and test it out. So let's just go ahead and come over here. We should go ahead and get this launching. Alright, so Blackthorn Civilian Pack. So we've got our JSON right over here. Where is it? There we are. Got a lot of things open. Alright, so let's go ahead and open our JSON. So this is the JSON we just made. As you can see, it was saved, not more than 1 minute ago. So let's go ahead and throw that in and see how it works. Now, as I mentioned, I'm not going to bother showing you how to do all this other fancy stuff just because it's not going to apply to most people. I wanted to show you the rotation thing because that is a very powerful tool that this Excel sheet has. That is probably the most useful one as far as so this Excel sheet. I highly recommend downloading it. It's available for free right over here. I don't even have a ad fly or anything. It's just literally uploaded onto Discord. So yeah, join the modeling archives. Ask someone about it in Transport Simulator Discord. So this is the section that you're going to be using the most. It's super easy to just translate, but this is the one that is the most useful because especially when you have something like this where it's rotated in 2 directions, that is just horrible. Alright, so let's go ahead and test. I think let's go ahead is going to be the title of this video. Alright, I almost said it again. Allow us to progress further in testing out this mod. I don't know. It seems to be a catchphrase of mine. So we're going to go ahead and see if everything worked out. If it did, that's going to be quite surprising because I usually muck this up a few times. As you can see, I mucked up the texture in a few spots on this. Not too great, not too great. And I didn't show you how to put everything into the mod. I might do that in a separate tutorial. Yeah, this is pretty much, I mean, this is a dry run of a completely fresh file. Oh, hopefully, no, never mind. I was gonna say, like, hopefully this extra JSON isn't gonna screw me up, because this is the JSON that's all done. This is one that I've kind of refined and tweaked. This is the one we just cranked out of our butts. So this is the one that's currently loading in, and I was gonna be like, oh wait, this one might muck up the game, but that's not in there. I didn't throw that in the jar. All right, so yeah, we can a lot of stuff to check. We can check, you know, the part positions, which is one thing, making sure the right parts go in, making sure that the parts rotate properly, making sure that the textures work, making sure the horn works, that the instruments go in the right spot, which I don't think. Oh wait, no, maybe they should. And then yeah, making sure that the parts go on right, making sure that the hitboxes are right. Well, collision boxes, I say hitboxes because I'm from Flans. Making sure that the windows are rendering properly. So this is really making sure everything that we've done works. Stalling for time while the game loads. Probably edit through that, but I might not. As you can see, this is before the stylish UNU gauges were added. And so yeah, the UNU parts pack has everything you need. You don't need the MTS official pack if you got the UNU parts pack. And that's nice, because the MTS official pack also got vehicles. And so let's say you got a server with your vehicles on it, but you don't want other people's vehicles cramping your style. Well, you download the UNU parts pack. You don't need their parts. UNU parts pack is only parts. You don't have to worry about UNU vehicles cramping your style. Those are in the Blackthorn pack. And so if you if you use the parts pack, you don't have to worry about other people's vehicles cramping your style on your server. You just have to worry about the parts doing that. So download the UNU parts pack, use it. All the parts are available. They're in Toolbox form. It's super easy. Doing it, I mean, you have to guess and check if you do it with regular vehicles. I mean, we do it with the regular parts. Parts pack is pretty fly, I gotta say. Plus, you got that cool modeling helper. That's UNU brand. All right, so let's go ahead and see how this works out. All right, so these are our vehicles, and as I mentioned, there are 4 skins, and this is kind of the reveal. I've only shown the regular camo skin. Here's the 3D 14 wheel that it uses, and the P3 seat, and here's the V8 engine, and then there's an UNU crate. And so these are all the parts that our vehicle is going to use, and we're also going to need a wrench to test out the gauges. Look at that. Looking fly. So the texture looks alright, the glass looks alright. We can test out the glass by coming over here to config, inner windows. As you see, the windows on this side disappear, but the windows on this side are still visible. Perfect. So the windows are good. Let's go ahead and test out the textures. Looks like the textures are fly. I've got a personal preference for the winter, so let's go ahead and put on the wheels. Looks like the wheels are doing good. All right, we can press F3 and press B, and this will show us all our hitboxes, and our hitboxes are on point, so that's all good to know. All right, so let's go ahead and throw the engine in there. Looks like the engine is fly. A good way to check if the engine is in the right place is to go into game mode 3. Gamma mode 3. And then we could sort of fly in through here and see how, yes, everything's lined up nicely, and the engine's on the transmission properly, and the exhaust is going in there nice. All right, perfect. All right, and then we can test the seats. This is a P2 seat. I meant to grab a P3. See, you got the 5 seats in there. Looking good. All right, let's go ahead and throw the gauges in. So I like to put the tachometer right here, and then the speedometer here. And are they on the proper sides? Looks like it. Perfect. So now we can hop in. All right, so it looks like we got the HUD all figured out, and as you can see, the HUD gauge lineup matches the vehicle lineup, so that's always good. Sometimes I'll get these mixed up. All right, and then we can also test out the HUD on different vehicles with different textures. So the blue HUD works out good. Oops. The desert HUD, brown, it's all right. Of course, you can change the HUD position as you see black. Well, the other one is a little better, so it's not too great, but it's certainly not bad. And as I mentioned, you might want to restrict your seat because, so as I mentioned, I've set it up so that the passenger seat was unrestricted. So let's go ahead and get the low profile UNU seat. Well, that just doesn't look right now, does it? Or what if we get like an MTS seat? Well, yeah, that probably just doesn't look right either. Nope, that just doesn't look right. I mean, look at this. You're telling me that these seats even... I mean, look at this. It's got two-tone vinyl finish. But yeah, you're probably going to want to restrict what seat type just so that the vehicle design looks consistent, because, I mean, come on. Alright, so now we got this all set up, and if you hold shift and press control a few times, you can get a secondary gauges to appear here. So let's go ahead and make sure our rotating parts work. Oh, I botched the steering wheel. Now it looks like I botched the position, so we're gonna have to go ahead and fix that. But hey, look, I got the alright, I don't have to fix that because look, this works just fine, the shifter. And so I bet if I go right in here, I probably just missed a 0. So the shifter and steering wheel are supposed to have the same rotation point. As you can see here, I, like an idiot, set the rotation point to the rotation axis. So that's where I screwed up the steering wheel. Now it's fixed, so I'm not going to bother going through that. That was just my fault. But as you can see, the shifter works fine, and the steering wheel is going to rotate identical to that. As you can see, the brake pedal pushes fine. If I pull the e-brake, it pulls back, so that's good. And the gas pedal rotates fine. The front wheels rotate fine. As you can see, the bearings and stuff don't, but that is because I didn't set up the rotation parts. So let's go ahead and set up the car, and oh, I probably screwed up the drive shaft in the same way. Yep, I set the rotation axis to the rotation point and didn't set the rotation point. So I'm going to go ahead and come right back and show you what it looks like fixed. Alright, so we're back with, I've gone ahead and fixed everything and threw in the proper rotations. I've got a really bad habit of pasting the rotation axis out of Excel into the rotation point, so just make sure you don't do that. And so now I can show you what this vehicle looks like with the JSON complete. So let's go ahead and, I guess the seats disappeared for some reason. I guess when you reset the JSON, it deletes all the parts. Oh well, no biggie, we're already done. Alright. So, as you can see, we get out of the wiggly zone. All the axles now rotate properly, and so does that drive shaft. That front drive shaft rotates perfectly. And then so does the steering wheel. And the gear shift. So, that's how you do the JSON on your vehicle, and it's really all there is to it. It's quite a bit of work, but with the UNU Excel file, it's certainly a lot easier, especially with things like that drive shaft. Those drive shafts look cool, gotta say. Definitely worth making that Excel file. Plus, other people will be able to use it. As you see, the text sits there properly. So certainly a good thing to do. Make sure you do everything right. The text is right, the position's right. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was informative. Even if it is a little long-winded, I apologize. But I like to be thorough. So yeah, at least I didn't show you how to do all these little tiny rotations like this, you know, being able to get the front hubs to steer and rotate with the wheels and everything. That's a little excessive, but the front drive shaft I think was worth showing you just because that's the benefit of using the Excel file. Anyway, I'll go and let you go. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see that you use this to make your own vehicles and make them pretty fly. And I'll see you again next time, probably in a tutorial about how to make an MTS pack.